As the first glimpse of the coast peeped through the clouds which covered the Timor Sea, excitement within our aircraft visibly mounted. The long white stretch of beach with the surf gently breaking on it seemed vaguely familiar. Was it Battano, or were we further to the east? Portuguese Timor was below us. We peered down over the green, verdant landscape and decided that indeed it all looked familiar. Here and there we could see a native uma or house. Yes, they were the same as we remembered them. But the Timorese, how would they react to us? Few would remember us, for surely most of those with whom we had lived and suffered would no longer be alive. These were the thoughts which flooded through our minds as the aircraft gradually descended towards a barren-looking plateau on which the Bocau airport is situated. One of the tour organisers, Arthur Stevenson of Sydney, was at the aircraft door as it opened to extend a warm welcome to us. Timorese customs and police officers seemed to take a curious rather than professional interest in the party. A huge banner of welcome was stretched along the side of the Carrera, or truck, which was to provide an unforgettably rough 5-hour trip to Dili, 140 kilometres to the west. Sunday morning in Dili. Everyone was up early to this first exciting full day of the 13-day tour. Some went on an inspection of Dili, only to find that Australia is not the only place where people like to stay in bed a little longer than normal on a Sunday. The streets were quiet and deserted. Others decided that the sparkling sea right there at the hotel's doorstep was just too inviting. Arthur Berry of Melbourne was the first to somersault into the sea. Others were more sedate. It was a magnificent morning. Few of us had seen Dili before, and then only through field glasses from observation posts high up in those hills to the southeast and southwest. The inhabitants of Dili went about their normal chores, oblivious of us or our cameras. A bread vendor obligingly pauses before showing us his wares. Surprisingly, fishing is not a large industry in Timor, but at Dili there's a fairly big and active fishing fleet. The radio masts on the western side of Dili mark the area where the Japanese swarmed ashore in 1942 and met violent opposition from the 2nd Commandos. Near the airport, buffaloes and cattle took little notice as a Dove aircraft owned by the internal airline Timor Air Transport landed from the west. Nearby, large buildings for government departments and light industry are being constructed by the administration. At Dili Wharf, supplies and materials coming ashore supported statements that a great effort is underway to expand the economy. The itinerary of all groups included Ailu, Mobisi, and the mountains south of Dili. It was time to depart. Because of the accommodation restrictions inland, the party of 30, which included 12 wives or teenage sons, split into 4 groups and headed off in various directions, some to the south and others to the west. At Dari, we stopped to inspect the watering and resting place which the 2nd Commandos had built in 1969 for the Timorese who have to walk to and from the markets at Dili far below. Proud to think that many of the 2nd, 4th Commandos, as well as our association, had contributed towards its cost. The commemorative plaque in Portuguese and English tells the story for all to read. The view from this Australian War Memorial across to the distant island of Arturo and down to Dili is a spectacular one. A feature of Timorese life are the markets conducted in all the main centres of population every Sunday. At Ailu, one was in full swing when Group B arrived. Members of the party mingled with the crowd and tried their hand at the long-forgotten art of bartering. Before purchasing higher-priced items such as basketware and cloth, it's essential to haggle. Anyway, it's all part of the game. Off-duty soldiers gathered at the fence of the Ailu Army Barracks and watched the activities in the marketplace across the road with interest. Amongst their ranks were European Portuguese and indigenous Timorese. From Ailu, the road rises to Mabisi, and as it does, it crosses over numerous creeks and swiftly running rivulets. Our first glimpse of Mabisi filled us with admiration for its lovely setting. We'd been told in Dili it was a very beautiful place, located in a huge, lush bowl surrounded by mountains on all sides. Almost in the center of this natural bowl, the Pusada, or hotel, is perched on top of the end of a pimple-like ridge. This indeed was magnificently picturesque country. Down to the right, the red roof of the army barracks was a vivid contrast to the emerald green of the surrounding countryside. You can be certain that at every market you'll be able to find a cockfight in progress. At Mabisi, Group B mingled with the locals as cockfighting got underway. Although the authorities frown on the betting associated with cockfighting, human nature is no different in Timor than it is in Australia. The pride taken in a fighting cock by its owner is matched by the interest in the sport, which manifests itself in the yells and shouts of excited Timorese as a fight gets underway. A sharp knife blade is tied to the leg of each competing cock. Money changes hands, and urged on by their owners and supporters, each cock parries and thrusts as it moves in to draw first blood. The birds are pulled apart regularly as the blades are examined for evidence before the winner is declared. The Timorese do not like a loser, and it's not difficult to guess the fate of the unsuccessful bird. At Mobisi, we met a number of Timorese who had served with us and carried our packs in 1942. One of our party, John Jones of Melbourne, was thrilled to find his old criado or servant boy, and emotional scenes took place. Whenever a former criado was found, he was given one of the 50 New Guinea police ammunition belts we had brought with us for this very purpose. We did not find many former criados. Many, we realized, had been killed by the Japanese or had since died from natural causes. Alan Thompson of Sydney was able to present belts to 4 or 5 former criados who had been positively identified at Mobisi. The visit to Mobisi of Group C included a walk down to the village of the local Lurai, or king, after which he escorted the group back to the posada. One could not help but be impressed with the magnificent scenic views from the posada at Mobisi. Surrounded by rose gardens, shrubs and trees, the posada is the focal point of the whole area. It is conducted by the sister-in-law of the Portuguese consul in Sydney, Deolindo Oncanaccio, and is luxuriously appointed with excellent accommodation and first-class food. The fertility of the Mobisi Valley is evident everywhere. Oranges, grapefruit, lemons, strawberries, pawpaw, and other fruit and vegetables thrive in the high altitude. Group B's itinerary took them eastward from Mobisi into the area where all of them had been located in 1942. The group stopped to take one final glance back at the beautiful valley they were about to leave. The road between Turiskai and Mokalulik reaches a point where you just have to get out and walk. High up in this mountain district, one obtains magnificent views, particularly northward towards Manatutu and to the east. Mokalulik was a typical mountain village. Notice the pumpkins on the storage racks out of reach of the pigs, of which there are plenty in and around the Umas. Here there was time to talk to the Timorese. The welcome was warm and sincere, and a great deal of excited interest was displayed as the word was passed around that the Australians had returned after 31 years. The villagers were extremely friendly and pleased to see the group. Again, some of our New Guinea police belts proved their acceptability as presentos, as Arthur Stevenson of Sydney gave one to the Shefi of the Mokalulik village. This was difficult country to traverse by foot, and many realized they were not as fit as they should have been to tackle the mountains of Timor. No one took the straight-up-the-side native darlans or tracks, but stuck to the easier kuta or pony tracks which follow the contours. Not all Timor is as rugged and as beautiful as this. On the northern coast, hidden by the Ramelow Range and other high mountains in the Mokalulik area, the rainfall is not as high as in the south. The country is much more arid and infertile. Way on the eastern end of the island, there are large areas of flatland and plains. But up here, the rugged high country attracts the clouds, which the prevailing wind brings in from the west and the south, and torrential rain quickly runs down the valleys into one of the numerous rivers which fall away towards the north or south. The attempt to reach Fatamakerick was called off after another ridge had been conquered, only to find Fatamakerick was still too far away to reach within the limited time available. However, the reward once again was to be able to sit and enjoy the magnificent views. Let's hope that this country will always remain unsophisticated and unspoilt as it is today. And now we head south to Sami. At Sami's Saddle, a famous ambush site in wartime, rugged Mount Kablak towers above you, and the views to the west and east are ones you will always remember. Looking in the direction of Sami, one can see the road snaking its way up towards you, hugging the side of rugged Mount Kablak, which at 9,500 feet is only 300 feet short of being the highest peak in Timor. That honour, by the way, belongs to Mount Tatu Malau, the highest point in the massive Ramelow Range just across the Ainaro Valley to the north. Up here, you feel as though you're on top of the world. Certainly, so far as Timor is concerned, you very nearly are. For here at Sami Saddle, you're about as high as any road reaches on the island. It would be tempting on a clear sunny day to spend hours up here absorbing the wonderful view down the valley leading to Ainaro. We later travelled down this valley and found it to be exactly the same as when we had last seen it 3 decades ago. But now let us move on to Sami. At Sami, the whole town is in festive mood as the arrival of the governor of Timor, Colonel Alves Aldir, is awaited. With Mount Kablak as a backdrop, Sami is delightfully sighted, particularly the section up on a plateau where the Pusada and administration offices are located. Bamboo, palm and similar vegetation had been cleverly conceived and utilized to make quite unique but very effective and colorful street decorations. The excited Timorese, dressed in colourful leapers, caught the spirit of the occasion for our cameras. The impromptu ceremonial dance with the Moriadors wielding swords and knives ever so gracefully, and women beating out the time with drums and cymbals, kept the inhabitants of Sami and surrounding districts entertained. As the time approached for the governor's arrival, the tempo of activities and level of expectancy visibly increased. Everyone was in a carefree mood, particularly the happy, smiling, and laughing children. Around a corner, a mounted horse guard headed by the King of Sami came into view. As they passed our camera, they indeed made a spectacular showing. The Sami decorations were capped off with this splendid archway. And now to Batano, Fatakork and Alice. When rain in the nearby mountains does not turn it into a raging torrent, it is relatively easy to cross the Sioux River between Sami and Batano. Gordon Hart of Sydney and the rest of Group B were keen to reach Batano and see the remains of the wreck of the World War I Australian destroyer Voyager, which went aground one evening in September 1942 after it had successfully disembarked us. Little is left of the Voyager. At low water, a sizable portion of the turbines and propeller shaft can still be seen, but all the rest of that ill-fated warship has long since been removed or is buried beneath the sand at low water mark. Batano Beach is quiet and deserted where once it had been busy as the only point where an occasional Australian naval vessel could bring in mail and ammunition. But the grounding of the Voyager turned Batano into a Japanese hornet's nest and made it quite untenable for the Australians. For a nostalgic few minutes, Group B followed the track along which they had moved inland on that fateful evening in September 1942. Many of the 2nd 4th will remember that first climb up the hill from Batano to Fatakork. Even in a vehicle, it is a difficult one, for the road is virtually non-existent. The view along the south coast and back to Batano, however, is still as good as it ever was. Hibiscus, lantana, and other flowers add to the charm of Fatakork. Not many Timorese now live in Fatakork, but those that are there are faithful to their church. Ever so slowly, they're rebuilding a little church from local materials and the remnants of the one destroyed by the Japanese in wartime. It is a long trip from Batano to Alice, and the road follows the hot, steamy coastal flats for many miles. Alice is decorated for the governor's visit too, but more modestly than at Sami. Alice was full of memories for some in our return to Timor party. Here, Group B enjoys lunch near the spot where the Australian headquarters had been located. One of the locals obligingly climbs a coconut palm to slash down a coconut or two for the thirsty Australians below. Up on a hill above the town, this old building served as the Australian Base Hospital in 1942. The visit to Ainaro was all too brief. It was here two priests, Fathers Noberto and Pyrrhus, had been murdered by the Japanese for the help they had given to the Australians. The Ainaro of 1942 had virtually disappeared, although the church on the rising ground above the township was exactly the same, except perhaps it needs some paint. The view of the valley from Ainaro towards the Sami Saddle is so spectacular that it's not difficult to understand why this part of Timor is sometimes referred to as the Switzerland of Southeast Asia. And now, let's move to the areas immediately south of Dili. Group C, with commendable initiative, deviated from their itinerary and from Mobisi took the road to Hatabulika and then along a jeep track to Letfo. Not surprisingly, that track was not marked on our map. It was typical of the most rugged roads or tracks in Timor. Near Letfo, Group C passed through a village which appeared to be yet another Lulik, or bad spirit village, deserted by its inhabitants. At Letfo, they met up with Group A and were in time to film the presentation of a New Guinea police belt by Ken Peace of Melbourne to Shefi Analdo, who in 1942 had been a most important criado serving Major Bernard Callanan, the Australian commanding officer. Cliff Morris of Deniliquin, New South Wales, stands by to help interpret the discussion. Letfo had changed too, although it was easy to recognise the poster building. After the intermission, our camera will take you south to Atsabi, Babanaro and Maliana, and back to Hatalia, Talu and Eramera. South of Letfo, we located the old white church on the hill above Atsabi. Although Atsabi today is noted for its silverware, we'll remember it for its bougainvillea and its large coffee drying area. There were some splendid distant mountain vistas on the road south of Atsabi towards Babanaro. Just south of Atsabi, a cluster of umas precariously sited high up on a jagged rocky outcrop is a feature you can't miss. The road passes by some irrigated plots of potatoes on a hillside and then enters an area where cultivation has been abandoned. Babanaro, a town serving a district of 30,000 people, was in wartime a major training area for thousands of Japanese troops. Because of this, no one really expected the people to be too friendly towards us. But it outdid most other places visited with the warmth of its welcome and its raucous farewell. Group C heads west towards Maliana. Without chains, this road in the wet season would be quite unusable. There is a road building program now underway in Timor, and the road from Dili to Bokar is being bitumenized. However, this road near Maliana will remain like this for a long time to come. Across to the west, the mountains which marked the border with Indonesian Timor seemed further away than the 20 kilometers they actually were. In country not too different to parts of Australia's Northern Territory, Group C meets up with Group B heading in the opposite direction. Our camera now takes you to the prolific coffee-growing areas of Hatalia, Tarlu and Eromira, and then to a very ancient part of Timor at Ipelo and Likasar on the coast west of Dili. After travelling through hot, steamy, arid country, it was a relief to reach the Hatalia area with its rice fields and stands of rubber trees. Javanese cattle, a relatively recent importation into Portuguese Timor, provide an interesting contrast to the more plentiful water buffalo seen wallowing in the cool waters of the Morobo River. Below Hatalia, rice and wheat crops grow well in the Morobo River Valley. In the last 30 years, large areas have been turned over to growing coffee for the European market. So far as we could establish, none finds its way to Australia. At Tarlu, coffee beans are washed and made ready for drying in large quantities, for this is near the centre of the principal coffee-growing district in Timor. Under the numerous shade trees, coffee bushes thrive in this country. As Group C leaves Tarlu, a rainbow appears in the clouded sky to the south. Eromira is a pretty little town in the center of the coffee-growing area, which helps to bring it prosperity. It has the distinction of conducting one of the best attended markets outside of Dili. Market Day is a day of excitement for many thousands of Timorese, and Market Day at Eromira is no exception. People come in from far and wide. Every conceivable item grown or made locally can be bought at this market. It, of course, provides an opportunity for everyone to talk and swap local news and gossip. Betel nut is a popular purchase for many Timorese. Eromira, too, boasts a special rice market where large quantities of this essential commodity are traded. One of the most beautiful churches in Timor is at Eromira. Many would agree its interior is the loveliest of them all. On the coast west of Dili, there is evidence of the glory of former days. Derelict ruins of the old customs house at Ipelo, alongside a huge banyan tree, makes one wonder what Portuguese Timor was like 300 or 400 years ago. At Zikasar, the aging stone wall ramparts near the sea literally reek with history. Buildings erected in the last decade or so seem strangely out of character. The visit to this area concluded at Bazar Tate. Nearby, an important Australian observation post overlooking Dili was maintained until late in 1942. There were, in fact, two Australian observation posts keeping watch on Dili in 1942. The second one was at Ramashu in the southeast. Some of those who had manned this vital post trudged up along the ridge from Ramashu village, and after quite an effort made it to the top and located the exact spot they had used as an observation post. In 1973, it appeared surprisingly exposed, but nevertheless, as it had in 1942, it provided an excellent view of Dili and its harbour. From here at the Ramashu O pit, a substantial amount of very useful information regarding enemy movements was relayed across the mountains to headquarters and eventually to Darwin. Wally Staples and Gordon Hart, both from Sydney, sat down to quench their thirsts, while Celestino watched Bill McMicking of Rowena, New South Wales, examine Dili through field glasses. One of the reasons for our return to Timor was to thank those who had assisted us so magnificently in 1942. It was appropriate, therefore, to invite representatives of the people of Timor to an official 2nd 4th Commando Association reception. 150 Portuguese and Timorese men and women, including the governor of Timor, accepted the invitation. It was our great pleasure to hand to the Timorese Red Cross and Catholic Church, through the governor, 2 cheques for about 1,500 Australian dollars for the benefit of the Timorese, particularly those living in the mountain areas behind Dili. Alan Thompson made a splendid speech on behalf of the 2nd 4th Commando Association. Following this, the governor presented our association with the official pennant of the Independent Military Command of Timor. Next morning, there was time to have one last look at Dili before boarding the 4 vehicles for the next stage of our tour. The party split into 2 groups, one to rediscover old hunting grounds in the mountains south of Manatutu, and the other to explore the eastern end of Timor, which none of us had seen before. In In 4 days' time, all would converge on Bokau before departing for Australia. The road eastward gradually rises to Hira, where one obtains a final glimpse of Dili, and a view along the coast east towards Manatutu. West of Manatutu, a stop was called to examine the spot where the 2nd 4th Engineers, using gelignite, created a massive landslide, resulting in this section of a vital road disappearing down the cliff face and severely hampering the Japanese war machine for a period. For those who had been there in 1942, the trip back to Laklo, Kribis, Lakluba and Puna was undoubtedly the highlight of the whole visit to Timor. From Lakluba, the track up to Puna is picturesque. Landslides are common in these mountains. At Puna, it was of great interest to watch the building of a new Uma. It was a job for everyone in the village. The men split bamboo and later tie the bamboo beams together with Timorese-style rope. For those who don't pull their weight, the ever-present Farmatori is an effective persuader. Meanwhile, the women return with the roof thatching reeds to complete the job. The track up to the Puna O Pip was much steeper than it was 31 years ago. Was it the mountains that had changed? Or was it us? Frequent stops to admire the scenery were mutually agreed upon. The O-Pip at the top of the high knoll overlooks this whole mountainous region. Surely the spectacular scenery up here must be hard to surpass anywhere. Magnificent vistas down the gorges carved out by thundering rivers in the wet season are breathtaking. Gordon Hart at Lakluba met the family of his faithful criado, now dead, and accepts a fighting cock to take back to Australia. Our cameras in the Lakluba-Laklo area were able to record many aspects of life so typical in Timor, from excellent shots of Timor ponies and their riders, primitive yet effective fencing, pigs, and piglets, and more piglets. Acres of rice under irrigation and water reticulation by means of bamboo pipe. A most remarkable and unique episode occurred on the very last morning in Timor, when an old ambush site was rediscovered by Rob Whalen of Claremont, Queensland, Bill McMicking, and others. Amazingly, a protective breastwork of rock built by them 31 years previously was still there. Rob Whalen, scratching around the rocks, discovered 5 spent cartridge cases he himself had fired through a Bren gun over 3 decades ago. The ambush site was an ideal one, although the escape route only just provided sufficient cover. Heavy casualties were inflicted on the unfortunate Japanese, badly exposed 150 yards away on the road 50 feet below the Australian position. In a moment you'll see our vehicle standing on the exact spot on the Manatutu-Bokar Road where the Japanese had been mauled late in November 1942. Arthur Stevenson and his faithful friend Celestino, and watched by his former criado Aiku, point to the area they had parachuted back into Timor in 1944. They then moved down to the Lachlan River at Manatutu in time to film a carrera on its regular scheduled run to Dili. Meanwhile, the remainder of the party were well on their way to the East End. At Lager, they stopped to inspect a very old fort strategically sited high up on a bluff overlooking the sea. It was still being put to use as a police post. Not far away, at a small coastal village, a number of Timorese girls were being taught the rudiments of a native dance. As our camera whirred to catch each step, they did not appear at all embarrassed. At Reiko, Dan O'Connor of Sydney gave yet another of his by now ritualistic performances involving balloons, buck teeth, and lolly snakes, which always seemed to be emerging from his pockets. His performance never failed to intrigue and delight the scores of children who constantly gathered around him. It was here we saw the first of the distinctive East End style Umas on stilts. The children of Reiko enjoyed hearing their own voices being played back to them on a tape recorder. There were a number of opportunities to watch Timorese women busily at work weaving the distinctive cloth for which this part of Timor is noted. Villages on the East End are much larger and quite different to those south of Dili. The Umas, built close together, are generally tidy and well kept. At Jaco, we were as far east as it's possible to go, and it was time to relax. Some enjoyed sailing in a native outrigger, whilst others swam or strolled on the beach. At Tutuala, one obtained a magnificent view back along the north coast from the Posada, perched high up on a bluff overlooking the sea.
Engineer 2, Peter Morris of Beaconsfield, Victoria, located a tame deer tethered near the roadside just above a medical aid station, one of the many throughout Portuguese Timor to which anyone can go to obtain free medical attention. On the return journey from Tutuala, members of Group C stopped to examine the numerous earth mounds scattered far and wide over the otherwise level Latam plains. The Timorese had been forced by the Japanese to build these earthworks to prevent a feared invasion from the air by Allied forces. Not far away on the north coast, 7 or 8 solid concrete pillboxes are strategically sited to protect the Japanese airfield at Con from a possible attack from the sea. The airfield, which is still used occasionally by Timor Air Transport, swarmed with Japanese aircraft and troops 31 years ago. From the hills behind the airfield, Z Special Force personnel kept a watch on aircraft movements. On the way back to Bocao, our vehicles crossed 2 solid timber trestle bridges, seemingly as sturdy and substantial as when they had been built by the Japanese in 1943. Near our destination, our cameraman was able to capture this wonderful view back towards the east end of this lovely island. Upon reaching Bocao, a few in the party enjoyed a swim in the magnificently sited pool fed by a torrent of water, which flows at a very swift rate from a natural spring above the town. After the swim, it was only a short walk back to the comfortable 2-storied posada, which had been our headquarters at Bocao. At the Bocao airport, an hour prior to departure, one of our drivers, Angelo, displays for us a piece of the old HMAS Voyager, which we later presented to the Darwin Military Museum. We spent those last remaining minutes talking to our drivers, who had been our faithful guides and mentors. We were sad, for the time had arrived for our once-in-a-lifetime experience to come to an end. How fortunate we had been. We had met many old friends and had made many new ones. We had reciprocated the friendship extended to us and had been able to say thank you to the people of Timor for what they had done for us over 30 years ago. Then we heard the sound of our chartered TAA aircraft coming in from the south and watched it approach and land. Soon we would be in the air and looking down on the mountains and valleys below, and our Timorese friends would be looking up at us. We Australians who know Timor should do everything possible to persuade the outside world not to push too many changes too quickly on the people of Timor, who most certainly regard Australians as their friends. Indeed, for those like ourselves who had been privileged to have looked below the surface, it can perhaps be said that if they only realize it, the people of the outside world could could learn a lesson or two from the Portuguese, who live in peace with the indigenous people of Timor.